I suck at Jiu-Jitsu. How do I suck less at Jiu-Jitsu?
I guess to suck less.
Ladies and gentlemen, the diabolical leader of the Headlock Squad.
Jake, how are you doing, buddy?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me on, Josh.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to get you on again. It's been a long time since you and I have really done more than just gotten to like message on Instagram. And it's always fun to get your perspective on things. And so I had a simple place to start this interview or conversation. And I already even kind of told it to you, but I kind of wanted to stump you to start just to, I don't know, put you down or something. But I kind of wanted to start with, could you explain to me what AI is?
Not well. I don't have a technical background, but like from a basic perspective, like what I understand is they basically make these algorithms, and then you can program those algorithms to whatever function that you want. So like AI has been around for a long time, but kind of the function that it was applied to is these chatbots that have really kind of taken it off and allowed it to explode in popularity. So people can have like conversations with them. But you can also apply AI to different things, not just conversations. So I think like when people think of AI now, they just automatically think of like, chatbots and stuff like that. But that's just basically like you created a AI like algorithm, and then you applied that algorithm, you like trained it to be good at conversations, but you can also train it to be good at analyzing statistics or like, whatever you wanted it to do. So like I don't have a technical background. I'm not going to go into like the intricacies of how all this occurs. But that's my basic understanding. So yeah, like you train a really cool model and then you just kind of like say, hey, model, I want you to like behave in this way, if that makes sense, and have conversations with people to yeah, exactly. Like that's basically my understanding of it.
That was a much better explanation than anything I gave on my 45-minute episode where I tried to talk about how AI was going to replace your jiu-jitsu coach. And I never even tried to describe what it actually was. It was too much. So I just thought that I could let you start us out with AI because this is kind of where this conversation idea came from. That episode, I had stolen an idea from your YouTube channel and I was like, oh man, I love this thought of like, can AI teach you jiu-jitsu? And so I went with, will AI replace your jiu-jitsu coach? And as I kind of dug in, I like, oh man, there are definitely things that it could already be used for and it's already really helpful for. And then you messaged me and we got to talking about how that is kind of what you and your team are developing now, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And so just on that note, what is like, I know, could you actually just first give a explanation of what the outlier database is? And then before we even get into specifically what is the name of it? Does it have?
I took a kind of I asked for names and we got kind of a wide variety of names as far as like the chatbot goes. Is that what you're talking about? The name for the
Yeah, the
chatbot?
chatbot.
I think the leader right now is Chat GiPT or Chat No GiPT. I think
That's
that's
pretty good.
the
I like
leader.
that.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty creative. There was also like Matt GPT instead of like Chat GPT.
Ooh,
Nice
that's pretty
wordplay.
good.
There was also one that I kind of liked was acai, just because it's like ACAI, if that makes sense.
Oh,
Like,
okay. ACAI.
yeah,
I
yeah,
get.
yeah. So
Oh,
they tried
okay.
it.
That's
It was
good.
a
That's
bit
good.
of a stretch, yeah, but I thought that was pretty creative. So we're not set on the name yet. But I think Chat GBT is probably going to be the winner.
Man, that rolls off the
Um,
tongue.
it does, yes, exactly.
Oh,
Nice bumper stickers and shirts and everything like that. Um, but as far as the outlier database goes, maybe I just go into kind of like the history of, because I think as you can kind of tell, like I don't know really anything about AI before getting into the business side of things that we're doing. And I'm just kind of learning everything on the fly. And same thing with YouTube. Like I didn't know anything about YouTube, just started making videos and learn as you go kind of thing.
yeah. To be fair, nobody
Um,
knows anything about anything until they start
yeah,
doing it.
true that. Yeah. So as far as the database goes, I started making videos where I was just basically watching like every match in like the 66 kilogram division of ADCC and just like making just basically like categorizing stuff and making different statistics that I thought would be helpful. And then I would make videos sharing those statistics. And people were like, man, I wish there was a way that you could display these statistics online. And I was like, man, I wish there was a way I could organize my notes better because right now I'm just taking a bunch of random notes in my notes app on my phone and it's very disorganized. So I went to a guy I trained jiu-jitsu with who's a software developer and just basically asked him like, would you be interested in making a website where it would organize my notes and then also display some statistical findings that I'm, gathering to people, and maybe we can make a product out of it because kind of the business model, as you know, is we do all this stuff for free, and then we try and funnel the audience into something that we sell, right?
Hmm.
Because we don't make any money off of the YouTube or the podcast, so. Um, yeah, I spent like 2 years doing stuff for free, and I'm like, man, I need a product. And this kind of like, was a potentially an opportunity for me to make a product out of. So that was the initial idea was me watching a bunch of footage, making notes, but then also gathering statistics and then displaying those statistics on a website for people to see. And then as we kind of progressed, um, I found that watching a lot, like if you watch every match from the 66 kilogram division, maybe like 10 of those matches are on YouTube, but the rest of them are on Flow Grappling, right? So having a product that people had to buy and then also subscribe to Flow Grappling to like
Hmm.
get the benefits of was not the best business model. So then we kind of pivoted. So now I'm like only entering YouTube matches. So now the product is we're like drifting away from all the Flow Grappling stuff. And now it's like all free stuff. So you don't need extra subscriptions to see the match footage. But then that led to a situation where the statistics aren't as helpful because I'm not watching like every match from a given division. I'm just kind of like watching random matches that Flow decides to post on YouTube or like,
Hmm.
yeah. So then we started to kind of drift away from the statistics side of things, and we weren't focused so much on displaying statistical information. And now we're kind of pivoting to a more like social media based approach that really like focuses on the ability for people to find like footage of what they're trying to study and share that footage with friends and save that footage in an organized way for them to reference later on. And then kind of like what we were kind of hinting at earlier, is the like 5 to 10 year vision is to create some sort of like AI vision model that will be able to watch, understand, and provide feedback to jiu-jitsu footage.
So, just still back to like where we're at now with your outlier database. When kind of like your pivot towards, free material from there as somebody, let's say if I'm a white belt that that wants to sign up, or, I only do no-gi, so I'm a beginner division guy. I don't know how no-gi guys differentiate things, but I just like, what is going to be if I were to be on there and start to use the tools and learn to use the tools that are available now, what will be kind of in hope my end result, or what will it kind of look like for me?
Well, I guess in the current state, to not drift too far into the clouds, because I think it's easy to drift into the clouds when we talk about this stuff and like, oh, in 5 years it could do X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
But in the current state, it would be like, hey, we learned a sweep from De La Hiva today in class. So you go on there and you type in sweep from De La Hiva. And maybe you see 74 examples of people sweeping from De La Hiva happening in competition. And then you click on one of those sequences of match footage, and linked with those sequences of match footage are people from either YouTube videos or instructional content teaching that sweep that happened in the match. So you watch something happen in a match, and then there's three study resources that you can click on, and it takes you right to the timestamp where that instructor is explaining how to do that sweep that happened in competition. So yeah, that's the idea.
That's super cool. What's
Yeah.
Why would I Why would I subscribe to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show Pro then, dude? What the heck? You can just we got to start deleting this free footage on YouTube. Um,
Well,
so
maybe there's an opportunity to have exclusive content where people who subscribe would also have like instructional content that's only available to, database subscribers. So
Jake, could you
that's
stop bringing it
yeah.
up? I'm not going to do OnlyFans. I don't know why you keep
That's where
trying
the
to
real money
suggest. I don't
is
know why
at.
you keep suggesting that to me, but I know it wouldn't do well. I know the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show Pro is doing better than that would. Uh, but on that note, like I said, that's already a very valuable tool. Just in a sense that I don't think people really realize what makes YouTube so valuable. Obviously, the content on there, but the search engine that gives you the content that you want, and the algorithm that gives you the content that you want without having to even search. Those things are just like incredibly valuable on YouTube. And really, that's what you were explaining is like, yes, this can give you the jujitsu that you want to know, but actually when you type it in, if I type in De La Hiva, it's going to be like whoever has the most popular YouTube video on De La Hiva, which doesn't always mean anything, and it doesn't always help me if I type that in on YouTube itself. And so already that tool sounds super valuable. But on that note, no longer limiting you to what we have in the present. That's what I think is going to be the most interesting part of this conversation, at least for the both of us, is just kind of hearing what the next, you given the 5 to 10 years, but what just the future of what jujitsu learning is going to look like when you talk about a visual AI model, and kind of what that would look like specifically for somebody. Again, we can go back to a white belt. Where would they put in? What would it look like? And then ideally, what would be the end result for them?
Yeah, it's tough. You know how quick this landscape is changing, so
Uh-huh.
it's hard to predict like even 6 months out. Um, but kind of where we're at least with like the immediate future, um, would be giving coaches the ability to almost like assign homework to students, in a sense that like you could design a class, like basically you'd have a tool that says like, hey, this is what we're doing in class. Um, and then maybe like, hey, if you want some context before you head into class, watch this 5-minute video. And if you want to study additional content after class, here's the match footage that I recommend you study, and here's the resources that I recommend you study, So basically the goal is to not replace coaches, but empower coaches to give their students more direction to their study outside of class. you know? And theoretically, that would make the students kind of take charge of their own training a bit more, in the sense that like they kind of get over that initial hurdle of studying jiu-jitsu outside of class and eliminating that initial friction that students have with that overwhelm of like, I type in De La Hiva and like, where do I even start? And it's like, oh, I just go on to this class that we just went to on Wednesday, and my instructor has 15 minutes of instructional content and match footage that he would recommend that I study to kind of build on what we learned in class. So it's just like giving very specific direction to their study outside of class. So that would be like one immediate example that I definitely think we can do. It's just a matter of kind of building that out. And I think that'll take a bit of time, maybe like 6 months to a year to do well, you know? But then like after that, I think the primary goal, like I think one big problem we have in jiu-jitsu is being able to keep people enthusiastic through the plateaus, you know?
Mhm.
Um, and I think if we could find a way to gamify the skill development aspect of jiu-jitsu well, and be able to say um, like if in a perfect world, right, maybe there's some hardware upgrades and you have like security footage pretty much in your gym that just automatically gets uploaded. And then you as a student come on there, and it has the AI was able to watch your rolls, annotate like your rolls, and say like, hey, you know, pass the guard from this position here. You tend to get swept from here. And then it can like track your skill development in more incremental ways and suggest resources and match footage for you to study based on where you're getting hung up, and recommend like the skills that it recommends that you develop, kind of thing, you know?
So what is kind of the, let's say first with the like the coaching and the curriculum. I already heard a problem that you were kind of addressing with how you presented it, which is the threat of coaches being like, oh no, but then people will be learning things that I don't teach, right? And so I think that was a good explanation of like, I don't know. I guess when you think of it like at a school, it's not just what a teacher teaches, it is through a textbook, you know? And so there are ideas that are discussed. And so I think that that is a good, you know, some people will definitely be like, oh, yeah, that's a really good explanation of this. I love this. This is going to be a great tool. Are there any other problems that you're facing now in it that you say, like, oh man, this is going to be the next hurdle, or just the next hurdle to, I don't want to say consumers, but users of of Chat GPT?
Yeah, a big hurdle is just the search part of it. And like basically there's a lot of different names for stuff in jiu-jitsu, just on the no-gi side of things. And then you open it up to gi, you open it up to MMA, you open it up to wrestling. There's 7 different names for the same position. And when someone comes on and they type in, you know, a given position, a big hurdle that I think we need to solve before we build out this coaching curriculum design tool would be the navigation problem, and being able to give users the ability to find what they want, you know? And then once we do that, then I think it makes sense to build out the coaching side of things. But until then, like if we built out the coaching side of things and the coaches weren't able to like find exactly what they wanted, it wouldn't be helpful, you know? So I think the next like 6 months are going to be focused on like making it very easy to navigate and solving that navigation problem, and basically training the model to understand jujitsu language. Um, and yeah, I think that's the current hurdle that we're working on trying to solve.
That's interesting. So how do you build a language model in a sport that doesn't have the same language, like where the language is always varying from place to place.
Right. And there's always new moves being added. Like recently through ADCC, there's now this have you heard of the Woj lock kind of
Uh-huh.
coming about?
Yeah, I
Yeah, it's
have.
like that's not in the database because that wasn't a thing until like 3 weeks ago. So yeah, that's another like problem that we're going to need to address. And basically, I mean, this is all like hypothetical, and I think this is the way we're gonna potentially go about trying to solve it. But we've basically made so say something happens in a match, right? Say I don't know. Yeah, say something happens in a match and it's like a 5-second sequence, right? You're in De La Hiva, you take an underhook and you do a knee cut across to pass the guard to side control, whatever. So say that took 5 seconds. That would have a timestamp and it would have a freehand note that you wrote, if that makes sense. So you would just like write in whatever language that you use, you would write that note. And then the second layer, which would be optional, but it's something that I do. Not everyone who enters data would need to do this. But you can tag it with different terms that are predetermined by us as the database. So it would be like De La Hiva would be a term, cross knee cut would be a term, underhook would be a term, side control would be a term. And you basically like tag that sequence with all of those yeah, tags.
It would be like hashtags,
And
like just clicking on what my post is about or what this little bit is
exactly.
about. Okay.
Exactly. So, and then maybe this wasn't a good example because I don't know if there's a lot of alternative names to the positions that we use, but let's say like saddle or crossashi or 411 or whatever. So maybe in the database we have that as like crossashi, but then the alternative names would be saddle 411, whatever, like a bunch of other alternative names. So the idea is maybe we could first train the AI model to take a freehand note that someone just like typed freehand and then suggest hashtags based on that freehand note.
Hmm.
And then the user can say like, yes, these hashtags are good, or no, that's not a correct hashtag. It should be this. And that's how we can like slowly train the AI model to understand just like someone typing in freehand Jiu-Jitsu language, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can build on top of that and then say like, instead of just looking at freehand notes, maybe here's a picture of De La Hiva. And then you can like associate the picture with the position, and then you start to make that association. And then once you make that association, then maybe it can start to watch a video and start to like connect things together. So that's kind of the vision of how we plan to train this model. But yeah, again, I'm learning as we go. So
Of
I
course.
don't know how effective it's going to be. I imagine we're going to have to pivot again in the future, but that's the current plan.
So do you kind of have while you're doing this, do you kind of have like I don't want to say a mission statement that you're doing, but like an underlying goal just of what you are trying to create? Because you're obviously pivoting. You're willing to kind of go, okay, it's not this, it's not this, it could be this, it could be that. What is I guess, what's your why behind it?
Um, I just want to make something that's useful for people. Um, and yeah, I think that's like the ultimate why, is to just make something that's useful and yeah, like that's basically it. Just try and be the most useful I can be.
Yeah, I get that. As you kind of look, okay, actually just still on just as we're on the kind of the coaching and the curriculum idea, and just still the idea that we're on before we're getting into like visual AI. I wish I knew terms of things, because then I could have just said a word, but I'm a jujitsu guy and language isn't my strong suit, you know? Uh, so do you have any other thoughts on how this specific AI that you're working on right now could be useful in other ways besides just the example that you gave of the coaching curriculum?
Man, I think the possibilities are pretty endless. Um, in the sense that like if you can have this model and prove that it works for jiu-jitsu terminology, you could use it for pickleball or golf or whatever you want, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I do think solving a specific problem is probably the best way to go about it first. But then once you solve that specific problem and prove that the model works for solving the specific problem of um, like no gi jujitsu, then it should be relatively easy to apply to gi to jujitsu, and then apply to wrestling, and then apply to judo, and then apply to MMA, and then apply to whatever you want to apply it to, you know? Um, so yeah, I think the possibilities are pretty endless. And it's easy to, like I said, drift into the clouds when talking about this stuff.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, like it's like you get up here and then it's like, yeah, but you first need to figure out a way when someone searches for something that they get what they're looking for. You know, like
Yeah. Uh-huh.
it's like that's like the most basic thing that we're still trying to solve like a year later. So um, yeah, it's going to take a while, I think. But yeah, as you know, these tools are getting better and better. And I think kind of the backbone of all of this is the data that we've collected along the way and all the tagging of match footage and the tagging of resources. So when these tools become available, we just kind of like throw it at the data and be like, does this work? And then we
That
can
makes
kind of
sense.
like go from there. But as these tools get better, I think we'll kind of have a better idea of the best like use case for it. But yeah, right now that's kind of where my head's at.
Do you think, okay, now we'll go 5, 10 years in the future where we do have visual AI. This is where I've been just trying to hold off getting to, but uh, what would, I have an idea in my mind what I hope you're about to say, but what would that look like if, and this is something that I know that is still being worked on and designed still with, visual AI. And so it's not like we have a simple explanation that can say like, oh yeah, it would look just like how it looks here. But what kind of in uh your mind does it look like when you guys are able to implement the tagging system, the search, and then visual AI catches up to a point where what does it look like? What's happening?
You know, I I honestly think it would be. I think we talked about this before, but like if I were to ask AI to create someone that I could talk to about jujitsu to help me develop a product that would be most useful in the future for jujitsu people, I think it would create you, someone who's a jiu-jitsu instructor, competitor, and has a podcast and who has their, finger on the pulse of the jiu-jitsu world. So I honestly think you could probably give a better answer to what type of product would be most useful to jiu-jitsu people 5 to 10 years down the road, utilizing the potential power of visual AI. So yeah, not to be yeah, I'll turn the question back on you.
Okay.
What
That's
what was your answer? Like, what were you hoping I was going to answer this question?
So what I'm hoping is that for anybody, not just a specific level of person, but white, blue, purple, brown, black belt, just anybody, that wants to get better could take footage of them doing jujitsu and upload it and it be analyzed in a way that doesn't just give you a readout of do these moves. Because I think that when it comes to jujitsu learning, sometimes like to get that information into the grappler can be hard. I think it would be so cool if it looked like you watch your footage and as you do, it is narrated by, ideally, the coolest thing to me would be the coach that you want it to be narrated by. And they are giving the perspective that they have given out enough and saying, in this position, you are too far away from your opponent. And so it's not as much a do this individual move, but all of the best competitors would have been closer in this situation, right? Would have just their distance would have been better or their whatever, just being able to analyze things that are more than what your coach does. Cause like, I think most of our coaches are like, oh, you were here. This is a move that I do from there. And I think that's incredibly valuable. And that's how we mostly learn jujitsu. But when you can get into why your coach thinks what they think and what they're actually visually looking for to know that situation, to me, it's way more valuable than like, yeah, I like to grab this grip or I like to have my hand here or whatever. Just knowing those kind of visual cues and knowing those things that are, again, harder to explain verbally and are easier, especially for, to me, a computer to see or recognize, versus when I watch jujitsu and I think this guy's distance is a little bit off. And so to me, it would be like you upload and then you ideally, the podcast blows up in the next 5 to 10 years. And then you're like, oh, I want Josh McKinney to review this round footage. And I break down like, hey, your distance is off by my knee cut instructional. This will teach you how to knee cut, right? I don't know if we can
Upsell.
I don't know if we can weave that in there in the AI. I'm down to help in any way as long as I can throw commercials in whatever I'm saying. But
Cue the music.
yeah. And thank you, Jake, for that great cut to commercial. I thought it would be a perfect time to tell you guys about something really exciting that we have going on here at the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, and that is our first ever real life sponsor. And I wanted to tell you about them because it's not only our first sponsor of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, it's actually the first job that I have kept more than a day in my entire life. And so that is BJJ Mental Model, specifically BJJ Mental Models Premium. What that is, if you are not familiar with the BJJ Mental Models podcast, they take a very conceptual approach on jiu-jitsu learning. And I've been on a few different episodes of the podcast. It, to me, is one of my favorite jiu-jitsu podcasts. But they also have a premium site that can come with the podcast. And that is what I want to tell you guys about today. And this is a company I've been working with, like I said, for a year. And I have been reviewing jiu-jitsu match and jiu-jitsu round footage for them. How it works is somebody uploads a 5 to 10 minute video and it gets sent to me. And I go on my computer, I watch it, and then I give you a breakdown of things that maybe I think would help you train better, help you get better, help you focus. Like a lot of the things that I do with reviews are for kind of competition mindset. And hey, I didn't feel like myself. What could I have done better? And we do reviews on those things. And what's really cool is you may, as an I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listener, be really excited about like, oh, Josh could review my footage. That's crazy. What's really cool about this review team is they have over 20 world championships on the whole review team. I contribute 0 to the 20, but 20 world championships on this review team. So the level of instructor that you get access to with these jiu-jitsu reviews is, it doesn't even make sense. And to be honest, it is somewhere between 10 to 20 times cheaper than doing a private lesson. Like for me, doing a private lesson with me would probably cost you 10 to 20 times more, even if we did it online. But through BJJ Mental Models Premium, you were able to have access to some of the best coaches in the world, some of the best competitors in the world, and Josh McKinney. And I think that it's absolutely worth checking out just for that. There's also all kinds of podcasts that are premium on that site. There's all kinds of other things. You get access to their Discord, so many other things that come with mental models that we'll talk about in the future. But the big thing I wanted to highlight for you guys, for I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show listeners, is how much fun it would be if I got to review some of your jiu-jitsu footage. So I have a link in the description. Be sure to sign up at my link and get signed up with BJJ Mental Models Premium. And so, yeah, I think that will be, that's what I hope. And I even hope for me that as a black belt competitor, I especially look at it like 5 years ago when I first get to black belt and you assume like, oh, well, I'm good at jiu-jitsu now. I'm a black belt. And then you get to compete against like the best guys in the world and they beat you up and it doesn't, you're like, oh, wow, there's another level of black belt I didn't even know about. And it would have been really cool then to be able to upload those type of videos and be like, hey, what does Gordon Ryan think about what would his perspective be on why I lost this position, right? Because as you get to a higher level, I think it would be less about review my whole round. What am I doing wrong? And it would be more like, man, I feel so good everywhere, but like here I keep losing. And then you could send in that. And I just think the specificity of knowing that like I like to try to build my game around whatever, Marcelo Garcia or whoever. And knowing that, I think it would be so cool to be able to kind of go, oh, well, what does Marcelo, why doesn't Marcelo get stuck here? What does he do in this situation? And I just think that like, as for me, as right now, I would use that tool probably more than any other jujitsu tool I think that I have, that when it comes to not being on the mat rolling. And so that's like what I think about.
I get goosebumps talking about this stuff. But that's pretty much along the same lines of what I was envisioning. What I was envisioning is maybe you select like 3 people to narrate your roles. Say I want Josh McKinney, I want Lachlan Giles, and I want John Danaher to look at this rolling footage. And then maybe it gives you a spit out of all 3 of their diagnostics. And then it says like, hey, all 3 of them agree that you should be doing this. And then if you want to take Josh's advice more seriously, he kind of goes out on a limb and says something crazy here that maybe you can try.
Yeah, he does.
Lachlan and Danaher don't agree with that, but Josh is like all about it. So maybe
Josh is like, subscribe to my instructionals,
Yeah. So that's kind of the way I was initially thinking it would. Like maybe you would select maybe 3 people and then it like compares their advice and says like, hey, you should really probably do this because all 3 of them agree. And then if you want to take one more, like weight one more heavily, this is what they suggest. And kind of along the lines of what you were talking about, I think if we could structure their feedback in a way where they initially start by giving you a concept and they say, when you're here, you should be closer to your opponent. And then it basically all the chat does. And I imagine, I don't know, I mean, who knows what it's going to look like 10 years down the road, but like currently, if it was giving you feedback, it would say you should be closer in this situation. And then it would basically get that information from some sort of resource, right? Where Josh was talking about this in podcast number 184 at 30 minutes in. And then it would say, you should be closer during this situation. And then it would give you like a hyperlink to a resource. And then you could click that and you can hear Josh talking about it and then see 10 examples from matches of what Josh is talking about. And then after that first paragraph talking about a concept, then it might say, here's some more specific techniques that you might implement to achieve this concept. So start off general of like, this is a general goal from this position. You want to get chest over chest. And then to achieve this concept, here are some specific techniques. And then again, you're linking those techniques with match footage. So not only am I giving you a like advice, but I'm also linking it with additional study material that you can watch being done in competition. So that's, I think, the ultimate goal. And currently, kind of like you were talking about, like I don't want you to analyze the full roll. I just want you to analyze this 5-second clip because I constantly get stuck here. Like the way we've set it up is everything is not categorized. Like it's not the full match that is like a segment of data, if that makes sense. Like there's a match that's entered that's just like basically the names of the people. And then there's 15 sequences from that match or like highlights from that match that get associated with that match. So you can just upload that 5-second clip and then get that feedback. And I think currently it would probably just be like you uploading that 5-second clip and then like other humans like in the like social network would basically give you advice and comment on that post that you made asking for feedback. But then as we progress, then that AI would take over that responsibility and then maybe humans like fill in the gaps to make it better, you know. But yeah, I think that's how we progress to a point where the AI is just like, yeah, that's role domination stage at like the 10-year period where it's just able to like give you great advice starting with concepts and then following it up with techniques and match footage associated with those concepts and techniques.
So we've talked about like, and we've touched on this, talked about like limiting problems of AI, but we just touched on what about the problem of jujitsu in the not it's not just the language, it's also the disagreement in the language. You know, there is a lot of language used because certain things are understood in a certain way, and then it may be used in a different place, and both can be successful and both can be good. So what is like deeper than just the names of the moves? I guess as you're looking at a conceptual idea and a conceptual model, what is the way to tie in the concepts to everything since the concepts are so disagreed upon?
Yeah, this is tough. And I think this is why we should eventually have the ability to give some level of customization, where like you get to pick which instructors, like it'd be like picking French, like you hop on and you like, yeah, I speak French. Like I want to look at stuff in French, you know? So like having some way to customize the feedback or the search results that you're getting to match the language that you speak and agree with. So yeah, I don't know exactly the best way to solve this, and I think this is just like a yeah, it's a tough problem to solve for sure. But yeah, I think like I talked about giving like the ability to maybe pick 3 people, and then say like, you know, one person says this, one person says this, one person says this. Try them out and see which works, you know, because there is some disagreement. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's not going to like take away from the work you have to do on the mat, you know, to develop skill, you know. So yeah, I think that's important to keep in mind. But yeah, this is a tough problem that you bring up.
Have you ever, man, there's so many, I guess when I think about it, there's so many really good guys that have really good perspectives, but it is so hard to, and a lot of times their perspectives will differ in places like largely. And so it's very hard to go like, even based on results, it's really hard to go like, this is the perspective that's relevant. Cause like, I guess the reason I even say that is because I really feel like the more boiled down the concepts were, the more broad, in a sense that when I'm looking at jiu-jitsu, I'm like, okay, I talked about like distance in my guard pass, right? And that's part of it. It's a really big part of it. But then there is also control, right? It's not like, oh, you have to control the shoulder. Like you could control either shoulder. You could control the back of the neck, right? But you're trying to control something. And so that would be two, like distance and control would be two of the lenses that I'm always looking at jiu-jitsu through, is like, if I'm coaching a match, oh, is this guy too far away to do what he's trying to do? Then he shouldn't do it. Is he too close to do what he's trying to do? Then he shouldn't do it. He should address that first, right? Or is he letting control happen that he shouldn't? Or is he not gaining control that he should, right? Those are just like the two main things I'm looking at. But my perspective is different than, whatever coach. But I think that being said, it still would be, I think, easiest to categorize if there were four huge categories, meaning like, I remember one time a guy sent me, I'm sure he was on psychedelics messaging me on Instagram late at night, but he's like, hey, I think it was, I want to say it was Hapkido or something like that, or Aikido. It was something way more ancient than jujitsu. But he goes, what's interesting to me is the lack of like explanation or the lack of agreement on what jujitsu even is. He goes, he's like, I agree that jujitsu is more useful than I don't even know what traditional martial art, but whatever traditional martial art. He goes, but something is, we all agree on what it is because there are four pillars of it. And he goes, do you have any idea of what like the four pillars of jujitsu are? And I was like, I don't know. It's like one of the only times I ever posted on Reddit. And I asked people, and everybody gave different examples. And some of them I agreed with, some of them I disagreed with. And it was like, man, if you're really looking at the most important, the broadest concepts of, I don't know, anything. I always cook. And so if you're looking like the broadest concepts of cooking, one of the broadest and most important concepts is going to be heat, right? How you cook the food, how long, how, much, but it's a concept. And so it's very easy to take that big part of a puzzle and go set your oven to 350, because in 15 minutes you're going to need your oven at 350. And it's like simple. And then you do it for this amount of time, but it's still based out of that concept of heat. And in jujitsu, we have positions. And I even think that we agree on a lot of names of positions and stuff. As they get more intricate, as the grips change, they start to change, but, like the broadest positions that we spend the most amount of time, I think we agree on. But just the broadest ideas of what's important and what is happening is like the biggest disagreement. And I just feel like if you were to be able to solve that, the the skeleton, the base of what jujitsu is, into however many parts, the smallest amount of parts that you could make it, it would allow for somebody to then go, okay, what am I missing in my jujitsu? And they're like, hey, the biggest thing you're missing is your control. You are letting people control you here, 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 and you are not controlling them in any way. And so then it's like being able to base off of like that broad idea, I think would be, or whatever broad idea, I think would be really, really make it much closer. It's just a thought,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I really like, I'm hesitant to get into the business of like making stuff gospel,
yeah.
And I feel like I'm in the business of listening to much more smarter people than myself and just organizing their thoughts well.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were saying this, it made me think back to a recent conversation I had with Greg Sodders. And basically he said that people's movements fall into 4 categories. They fall into extension, retraction, rotation, or basing. So from a given situation, if you're struggling to control someone, you could be struggling to control their rotation, or you could be struggling to control their extension or retraction or their base. There's different things that they can be doing to disrupt your control. So just, yeah, like if I were to give an answer to that question, I really like Greg's framework that he thinks about it through. And I've really tried to think about it recently through that framework and say, like, from this situation, I'm struggling to control this person because they're turning to their knees and they're creating movement. So I really need to develop ways of controlling their rotation, and I need to prevent them from getting to their knees. And if I can control that rotation, then I can control them like as a whole better. So that's the way I'm currently thinking about it. But I really do not like the idea of like me solving the problem and say like, this is what jiu-jitsu is. Like everyone else doesn't really know what they're talking about. And after like this is it. And I do kind of like, I gravitate more towards the idea of like, here's 3 people's perspective on it. Which one do you agree with more? So it's just like, yeah, I hear what you're saying for sure. Yeah, I think this is a problem that we're probably going to have to solve like 3 years into the future. But yeah, no, I hear you. And yeah.
I think too, though, counter argument is maybe that makes you the guy that has to solve it, is because it doesn't seem to be as big of a problem in other sports as it is in jiu-jitsu.
I see.
And so I think it's a solvable problem, but I don't think it's solvable by an individual, right? And not that that's obviously I'm saying that the responsibility's on you, but it's not I don't like that was kind of my point, and it's like we're gonna always disagree on terminology, and then it's like, well, then what is the defining thing? And to your points, what you're doing is, a lot of terms that people are using could be interchangeable, or even there's certain places that we're all using the same term or something like that. And I guess where I think about it though is, if we, as this is more from a selfish standpoint, if we as a jiu-jitsu community had a way to define anything, you know what I mean? Like, that is what's really interesting, is when you really get into definition of any statement made by a coach. If you had 25 like good coaches in the room and you just said, hey, don't be nice, just tear apart what this guy said, right? A lot of times they will you'd be like, oh my gosh, I heard something way better than what all these guys heard. But what it was to me, and I do the same thing. You look at things through your perspective. And so when a coach gives a perspective that you don't share, even if it's right, it's just a slightly different perspective. It's so hard for jiu-jitsu coaches to accept. And so when you look at the idea that this would be the jiu-jitsu AI, and it would have the ability to define jiu-jitsu language, not change it, but just put definition in it. I think that is it's a great power and a great responsibility.
Yeah, I didn't realize what I signed up for when I started down this path.
When you started posting on YouTube, man.
I know. All those years ago. No, yeah, I agree. And maybe it's one of those things where like from the science perspective, like I think right now, AI is basically just summarizing what other people have said. in an organized way. But I think the future is that the AI is going to be able to build upon it and solve some problems that humans haven't been able to solve in the future. So maybe this is kind of an unintended path that we're going down, that after we do train it on a bunch of information, that it will be able to kind of go a step beyond where we've been able to get as humans, and kind of break down some of these barriers that we currently have in jiu-jitsu. So maybe this will be something that's solved by a higher power and not by me.
All right. I like it. But I still feel like the higher power is still going to be your reasoning behind it. Your reasoning for wanting to be useful to the community like you are. And I think you're already doing that a lot. And as you go more, I think that, I just think that you're going to solve some of the big problems for us. It's going to be helpful. Anywhere else you want to go on while we're still on AI?
Man, no, I think we covered it pretty thoroughly.
I kind of felt the same thing. And so I just I had a few things I wanted to ask you, just because I wanted to ask you for my own personal reasons, right? But I know that you have gotten to get some training in with different coaches and just have good conversations with different coaches. And I know like how even interviewing on somebody on your podcast is like, you can put something out, but you also got even more perspective from this person and got even more from this person. And you've already mentioned Greg Souders and how that's been helpful. And so if you want to touch on that more, that would be cool. But then any other highlights I feel like it's been like a couple of years since we've talked, but any other highlights in that time where you've just gotten to train with other people?
Yeah, Greg's the recent one. So that's the one that's like fresh in my mind, that I've been thinking about a lot recently. And yeah, I really enjoyed my conversation with him. I think, like I said, that framework of just like categorizing things into like 4 broad categories and saying like, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve, and being able to like very accurately describe that problem, and then being able to propose a given solution and say, this is why this solution works, because it solves this problem. I think is a very good framework to go about problem solving, so just from like an analysis perspective, that's what I've been really trying to focus on lately, is defining the problem and then proposing a solution, and then basically just like reiterating the problem and saying like, this is why this proposed solution solves this problem. So I think my conversation with him has really changed my like analytical perspective. And for some reason, I have gained some sort of notoriety from my analytical perspective over the years. And I didn't have much like thought behind it. It was mostly like intuition, and just trying to be helpful. But then talking with him has really, I think, helped me make it more concrete and have more of a process when I'm analyzing given footage. So yeah, that's been super, super helpful for me.
So when you talked to him about that, was there any moments of like, oh, I kind of do that already, I should focus on that more? Or how was that kind of like when if you could break down how that affected your, analysis, just how it looked for you when you heard that stuff?
Yeah, so it kind of comes back to the language thing, because it's kind of funny. Like when he first reached out to me and just said like, hey dude, I think you're really close, but I think I can help you like enhance your videos a bit more, if you're open for a chat. And initially I was like, oh man, I'm scared to talk with this guy, I thought it was going to be more of the like, remember the Danaher interview with Rogan, where like Danaher made it seem like Rogan's never done jiu-jitsu before when he's breaking down the
Yep.
Gordon Ryan Cyborg one. I was like, yeah, it's gonna be like that. I don't want to like film it or anything.
He would ask a
But like,
question, and no matter what, the answer that you were going to get was no, no.
yes, exactly. So I was very scared that it was going to go that way. So I didn't record our first conversation. But I happened to be making a video at the time that he reached out to me. So as we were talking, I was just like, hey, like I'm currently making a video. Can I just show you like what I'm gonna basically say in my video, and then you can basically explain it in your language to help me kind of better understand what you're suggesting that I do. So basically just like walking through a couple examples. The specific video was my breakdown of Joseph Chen versus Elijah Dorsey. And I was talking about how like when Joseph's defending K-guard, he like gets his knee to the inside of Elijah's hip. And then he kind of backsteps and put his weight over Elijah. And I had already found a clip where J-Rod gets his knee to the inside, but then tries to run away. And then that allowed the K-guard person to enter backside 50-50, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But because Joseph put his weight into Elijah, it prevented that backside 50-50 entry. And then basically Greg goes, yeah, like once you pass someone's legs, you don't run away from them. Like when you're passing the guard, you go towards them. Like this is like makes total sense. And I was like, yeah, like of course that makes total sense. I just like thinking about fancy things in very simple terms is something that he helped me with in that sequence. And then when I explained it in the video, it got very good feedback. Explaining it in simple terms, using a very simple guard pass, and then you use a more complicated sequence, but you just relate it to that simple guard pass, if that makes sense. You just basically say, we're doing the same concepts, we're just doing them in a more like dynamic way. And then I showed him another sequence from the back, and I was like so stoked about this because I saw like basically Joseph from the back was like, he was posting on Elijah's elbow, if that makes sense. So it made it hard for Elijah to switch from this grip to this grip when defending a rear naked choke. Sorry for those of you that are not watching the video.
That's their problem.
But basically Greg was like, yeah, you can compromise the grip of someone either at their elbow or their wrist. And this would be an example of compromising their grip at their elbow. And you're pushing their elbow up to compromise the structure of their grip and not giving them the ability to switch to this grip because you're not giving their elbow the ability to tuck into their side. So this would be an example of compromising their grip at the elbow, not the wrist. And I was just like, wow, that is so, he has a lot of like isms, you know? And later I asked him like, hey, are there any other isms that you have that you find yourself using a lot? And he wasn't able to just like rattle off isms, you know? And he's like, they're more of just like, I see something and then I like say it. So I think this is hopefully something that we can help with in the sense that like, as he puts out more content, as people like yourself put out more content, we can organize their isms and be able to apply them and reference them in easier ways and like direct people to those isms effectively, like when they apply, you know?
That's really cool.
Yeah, like that, I think that was very insightful and helpful for me. And it's kind of unfortunate I didn't record that because that was like super valuable for me. But I put out the video and that's kind of I guess the takeaway or the reference piece that we have from that conversation. But yeah, like I said, all the footage I had already compiled and I already had it ready and I already had all my ideas that I was going to say organized. He just helped me put it into like isms, which like make total sense and like simplify things greatly. And yeah, that was super helpful for me.
That's really cool. So any other conversation highlights you've gotten to have with anyone else that has changed your perspective, especially your analytical perspective, but just your perspective in general?
I got to talk with Joseph Chen a few times. Um, I really like him. He's awesome. Um, but one thing that I feel like tends to do when he's analyzing stuff is really see which side people are doing things on. Um, like, oh, this person likes to take an overhook with his right arm, and
Hmm.
he doesn't really do this from the left side. He only does it from the right side. Or, yeah, like this type of thing. And this is something that I wasn't really paying attention to until I talked to Joseph.
Hmm.
And now I'm starting to try to pick up on these things more, people's tendencies to do things to one side rather than the other.
You know who Chris Paines is?
Yeah, because of
Have you
you. Yeah.
yeah, have you ever gotten to talk to him?
No.
So he was the first person that ever pointed that out to me. This was probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And so I was a black belt, and he goes, "Have I ever told you my concept of the dark side?" And I was like, "What? No, this is going to be awesome." And he's like, "You ever think about, that you play one version of jujitsu when you're on your right side, and you generally will play a different version on your left side?" And I was like, I've honestly never recognized that I do that, but like, yeah, I triangle on this side, I arm lock on this side instead. Yeah, there's a lot of differences. And he said, his claim was like, I think it's like kind of predictable. He's like, because you think, it was something, I'm probably butcher what he said, so I apologize, Chris. But he's like, you think like, okay, this person is right-handed, and that means that they can only use their right hand. And he's like, no, generally that means that you are dexterous with your right hand. You can write with your right
Mm,
hand. You can throw with your right hand, and things that require like small little things. But honestly, he's like, it may feel more comfortable to post or to push with your left hand. And he's
mm,
like, and so if you think about your guard when you're playing it on this side, this is the hand that you're using. But then what I started to recognize was like, with Gordon, when you watch him collar tie guys, so often he will just take one hand and grab their dominant hand right when they reach. And almost everybody wants so bad to collar tie with their dominant hand. And as soon as you take it away, the idea of using their other hand and changing angle just like it's like, nah, I can't do that. And generally, if you're going with a right-handed person and you are right-handed and you grab left hand on right hand, you are now making it like, hey, you don't get to use your best tool, and I'm not going to use my worst tool. And so that when he explained that to me, it was like, oh my gosh, that's huge. It started to make me even note, like in my own guard retention and stuff, I'm getting passed on this side because I open my elbow a ton and I don't do it on the other side. I know not to do it on the other side. And yeah, that was such a big thing that was helpful.
yeah, kind of along those same lines. What I've been trying to work on in my own training is a lot of the like the grip fight from that like split squat pass against like a knee shield, like when you're in
Mhm.
a split squat trying to grip fight. And a lot of times when you're passing to the left, your right arm is just kind of like, framing against their body, but your left arm's the one that's doing the grip fight.
Mhm.
And a lot of times they're framing with their left arm and they're grip fighting with their bottom arm, which is their right arm, if that makes sense. So you're setting yourself up for a grip fight where they get to use their dominant hand and you have to use your non-dominant hand.
Mhm.
Whereas if you pass to the other side, now they have to frame with their right arm as like a cross shoulder post, and now
Mhm.
they have to grip fight with their left arm, and you get to grip fight with your dominant arm. So this is something I've been thinking about from that position as well, but same idea. Yeah.
But what happens when you focus so much on it and then the guy's left-handed? The
Yeah.
lefties, man.
Bastards.
My coach is right-handed and literally does every move of jujitsu that he does left-handed, like left side. And when he was a blue belt, his coach told him like, it'd be really confusing to people if you only did everything left-handed. And he was like, oh, okay. And so that's all he ever worked on his jujitsu. And still like I can only because he's my coach, I really can only put an actual De La Hiva hook in and play De La Hiva on the weird side because he
That's
always
funny.
passed left leg lead. And so yeah, there's a level of confusion. every once in a while I'll start to go with a guy who's left-handed, and I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna go back to the normal side, bro. I'm gonna go back to where everything's safe for me.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good. That's like the Craig Jones thing. I remember him talking about that years ago, how he tries to force the low knee shield on the like opposite side
Hmm.
because people aren't used to passing on that side, and it just gives you that little advantage. Yeah, it's
And
super
it
interesting.
and it's not only that, but like if you, for me, like analyzing certain athletes I'm trying to compete against, there are certain guys who have like only ever been passed on or their back taken when somebody goes to their right or to the right
Mhm.
of the passer, right, the left of the guard player. And
Right.
it's like very noticeable, but it's this, I think that kind of my thought behind a lot of it for a lot of these guys is the retention's even very good on that side. And so you'll see the pass attempted 6 times on that side before it's ever hit. But I really think that they're less dangerous on that side too, right? You have less offensive reps going from your frames right into splitting legs and attacking, or right into wherever you're going to attack from. And so like seeing that and going like, oof, where is that in my game? And then seeing it in like certain places like, oh gosh, I always thought I was good at defending this specific pass, but I was just good at it on one side, and
Mhm.
that's been a really big, more plugging holes for me than using an offensive has been big for me.
Yep. Yeah,
Do you
no, it
have
makes total sense.
do you have any other things in your own personal jujitsu that you have been focused on that you've been looking at? I heard you on a podcast a little bit ago talking about knee shield, so I feel like you might have been dealing with the split squat knee shield for a little bit. But anything else you're looking at or ideas you're looking at?
Um, I think I'm still kind of in that realm. Kind of along the same lines of what we were talking about, that I've been messing with recently is like if someone's seated and you're approaching their guard and you're planning to enter that like inside camping, like split squat type position,
Hmm.
um, like a lot of their framing pressure is going to be coming from their top arm, and their bottom arm is going to be the one making the connection. So if you could take a cross like wrist grip, um, and then like when they're seated, you take that grip and then you pass to the side that makes that their top arm.
Hmm.
It makes it hard for them to frame you away, and you're immediately like putting a lot of pressure on them. So like for a while, I was just entering that like inside camping position and just trying to deal with their frames once I got there. But preemptively dealing with the frame and allowing you to like get in a really deep like camping position, I think has really helped me a lot. And it really forces them to like overreact, push away with their legs, or use their bottom arm to push away, which allows you to, take a near side underhook or whatever. But I think that is something that I've been having a decent amount of success with recently, um, as far as like preemptively dealing with frames as opposed to dealing with them once you get to the position.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you ever, I know you generally just analyze um like matches, but have you ever watched anything from Henry Akins?
No, I haven't. Other than the podcast you've done with him, which just has piqued my interest as far as like weight distribution goes and stuff like that. So it's on my list for sure.
So when applied to passing, and I honestly I couldn't even tell you what to watch that would be applied to passing. I did a private with him that was like 2 hours, and it was after doing I done like went to a seminar of his, and they did a bunch of like pressure from side control and mount and scarf hold, and it was super unique stuff, and it was like very helpful. But I really wasn't super focused on putting more pressure in side control. And you know what I mean? Like I got finishes from those positions a lot. And so I didn't really worry too much about it. But then I did this private with him on guard passing, and the perspective was so much different. This is actually where a lot of my thoughts on like why we need defined language and why that's so important is because none of the moves that he taught are real jujitsu moves. They're none of them. They're not. It's just like you are just constantly falling through people's and past people's frames and doing it at a rhythm and because like when somebody goes to frame you, right, there's one point when they go to put that hand on your shoulder to frame you. Usually they frame, they stop your movement, and then they'll even pummel a leg inside. They'll get a knee shield and they'll like reinforce it with another frame. But there's one point where you're moving forward in time or down in time, and they are down with your weight, and they try to catch you with that frame. And they are strong in one very specific direction with that frame. Like you cannot change angles with that frame. And so the ability to like change angle right as, and this is something you'll see, and this, when he started to point this stuff out and then be like, yeah, you can watch Gordon do this stuff and watch how he will use people's frames to flatten them, or how he will fall through people's frames, how he'll fall. He's like showing kind of how he will fall the mount from De La Hiva on people. And it's like, how did that happen? This is guy's like supposed to be the best guy in the world, and he just is in mount now. And really, it was the first, at least the closest thing that I ever felt like I got explanation to what Gordon Ryan was doing differently on top than anybody else. And it was just, it's obviously it's even harder because he's not in the jujitsu space now, right? He's not in like the competitive space. So the terminology is so far separated. And so it was such a thing that like I almost needed to feel and then feel over and over and then like, just get those reps. But some of his like, and that's when you start to break down guard passing is like just trying to get close to a guy, you're almost always going to be in knee shield, or you're always, I mean? Like there's just very few places you're going to end up because that's where they're going to frame you with. And the passing for me on knee shield, especially, is like that's a position I used to struggle with. And it's now like the only position I want to be in on top. It's like, just let me be there. I know even if I'm not passing, the guy is getting so exhausted. So just learning how to kill their frames, how to be heavy, and how to wear people out. But his stuff, I don't know what would be the best avenue to do it, but his stuff is, I don't feel like I recommend a lot of coaches, especially, but his stuff is like, it was game jujitsu ruining for me. It was like, I don't know what I've been doing the last, I've basically just been building up myself enough to slightly understand this perspective enough to start to try to do it. And I could be crazy and wrong on all of it, and he could be a crazy old man and all of it could be wrong. But the change in my jujitsu, because to go from like, hey, I was doing real jujitsu moves to now I'm doing things that I don't think have a lot of names and stuff, and we're just trying to figure it out based on these concepts. um that switch has been like man, it's so, I had to start as a white belt at this stuff, and now like I'm getting to, I don't know what belt at it, but it's been effective in like black belt competition pretty well already. And it's like, man, I think I can continue to get better at this. I really don't see the ceiling at all in getting better at it, but the concepts themselves, once you start to understand them, were just like, to me, were game changing. Because like what you said about the De La Hiva and falling through the De La Hiva, I did this private with him, and he gave this example of like, if you, he's like, I was talking about backing out of a position, and he's like, why would you ever back out of this of a position if you're trying to, isn't your goal to pass the guard? And I was like, I guess. I mean, my goal is to not get submitted here, but I guess. And then he gave the example like, okay, well, Josh, if we're running a race and we're in his little matted garage, and he's like, and that is the finish line. And he starts to walk towards it, and then he turns around, and then he's like, does that make sense? And I was like, no, it doesn't. And then he kept giving the example. I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm not going to run away anymore. And that perspective, you get immediately, you try to implement it, you get submitted way more to start, right? Like you lose way more. But as you start to realize like, man, all of these guard passes are me falling through these frames and getting into the spaces that I want to get into to whatever, pin the person or take their back. And it's like, yeah, his explanation, super unique.
Yeah.
I think you would really
Yeah,
love
no,
his perspective.
you've definitely piqued my interest. I'll start to input some of his stuff into Chat GPT, so
All
it'll
right.
come up. Yeah.
All right.
Um, yeah,
Man, I
it kind
made
of
a
reminds me
change.
of
I did it.
yeah. Your influence has been made, yes.
Finally.
Um, yeah, no, it reminds me of I got to talk with Dima and Joseph, and they were talking about yeah, I mean these aren't their words, but it just kind of reminded me of this recent analysis of like CJI. I've been watching a lot of footage of that, and like there's a lot of like guard passing in quotation marks that's like you start to get entangled in a guard and you just like rip away.
Hmm.
And you don't look to like counter their guard passing. And I think like Joseph was talking about how he's very comfortable inside guards and basically developed the tripod passing system that he's like known for now as a way to counter like shin on shin or like butterfly guard. So it's like I'm not going to run away from this guard. I'm going to find a way to make it hard for you and taxing for you to maintain this guard. Like if you want to use this guard, it's going to be exhausting for you to do that. Um, and that was kind of my first insight to this type of methodology. But then like, yeah, like the like exciting people, and again in quotation marks, are the ones that are like ripping away from guards and like cartwheeling and like doing a bunch of like crazy stuff and get the crowd going. But then like the people who are like really good at this type of thing are I think appreciated by like jiu-jitsu practitioners, but not so much by the average, you know, fan. But yeah, then like Joseph was talking about how in his first run at trials, he got ankle locked by Mateus. And Mateus likes to ankle lock on the left leg. And Joseph got his left leg entangled and got it broken because basically he was like really comfortable in these entanglements. And he was like, oh, I can just kind of like, you know, counter this entanglement. But then when you run into someone who's like really good at it, it can be pretty devastating. So basically kind of circling back and kind of understanding like what side your opponent is like really good at attacking from. Like, hey, I'm good at putting weight and like doing this type of Henry Aiken's style of passing if he doesn't entangle my left leg. But if he entangles my left leg in this position, I'm getting out of here because this dude is like super dangerous from this spot, you know? So maybe that would be like a good compromise between the two lenses.
Yeah, I think that makes, yeah, I think that makes really good sense. I think that, so the perspective that he shared too was like, you know, that what he differentiated was you have speed passing or you have pressure passing. And he's like, speed passing generally is built around really specific timing. And if you think about the idea of a guy who walks in and out a lot, right? One, that means that his weight is not on his opponent. His weight is on himself, you know, is on the floor, right? To have the control of your own weight to leave whenever you want, right? But then when you watch that guy too, it's not like he doesn't get jujitsu to happen. He plays that distance that is a little too far for guard to happen. And if me as the guard player opens up too much, I just gave him the space that he needs for a speed pass to get through. And so to me, I know that people look at it as like, oh, you shouldn't be backing away or disengaging or disconnecting. But it's just part of the game, I feel like, of jujitsu, right? It's like, because the guard player could also cover that distance, right? He could also go to wrestle up on a single leg, or he could do whatever, right? And try to cover that distance. And so to me, there's like a beautiful place for both of, you know, I love seeing the Rotolo style, like if there is a space, I'm going to fly through it, you know? And I think that's really fun to see. And it creates a lot of movement that creates a lot of submissions for those guys in those exchanges. And I just think it keeps the matches from being redundant. you see in the gi, I think that's one of the biggest problems that people have with the gi is that people get too obsessed with the meta of the gi right now. And it's like every match is the same. It's like everybody's playing the same thing. But what's weird is if you looked at the gi 5 years ago, they were playing different stuff, but everyone was still playing in that same little was playing in the same little box of like, oh, we all play spider guard. And then it's like now, oh, people don't play that anymore. We're playing this guard instead, right? But everybody seems to kind of like agree that that's how it has to be. And I just to me, one, like being able to just step outside of that is really big, but being able to just see those perspectives as separate things and being like, hey, I'm not going to use speed passing when I'm trying to beat up the 20-year-olds at my gym that have super flexible guards, but they also don't frame me near as much as they should. And they let me get way too close, way too often. And so those guys I can be heavier on and I can, use those things interchangeably.
Yeah,
And sometimes
for
you just
sure.
got to run away, man. Like sometimes you're just in so much danger. You're like, for example, I have been doing this sweep from knee shield on bottom. It's really hard to even explain because I get it kind of looks like, you know what a Shaolin sweep is?
No.
It's like a rolling over your back sweep, but it's a gi thing. They hold onto
Mm,
the pant leg and the sleeve. And I've been doing something that looks kind of similar, but it's not off any gi grips, and it's with like controlling the wrist of the arm that's usually trying to get your head, and then controlling, I guess, what you would call a reverse collar tie, right? Instead of like a same side collar tie with your free hand, kind of reverse. And what happens from that knee shield position, if you let it, is everybody puts their shoulder right on your belly button. And it looks
mm,
like the right position. A lot of times it turns into over under if you don't address it. But for whatever reason, if you have that wrist and you kick them in the butt with the leg that's between their legs, it's not like they flip over and it's this athletic thing. It's almost as if you sweep them while they're still on top of you and you can choose whether or not to turn. But that being said, on that gripping sequence, it really is like, okay, the person's putting their weight, they're committing to this. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really change anything. It kind of lets this sweep happen. I lost my train of thought on where I was going with this. That I've been thinking about that sweep way too much, and it brought me back to, man, maybe I should be doing this, maybe I should be doing that. Where was I just going with that, Jake?
you just had to find a way to weave it into the
Yeah,
podcast.
I love hitting sweeps, from I don't remember where I was going with this on the weight distribution thing. I want to say it was that I think that it's that our, like part of it happened because all my guys have been focused on weight distribution. And in
Mm,
the idea, like we're like, oh, well, you just put your weight on the hips here. And it feels so right to do in the position. And then we've all been messing with it. And we're like, no, that's the wrong move. Like, this is why this sweep works, is that's you're in just a really bad spot. It's easy to off balance you. And just kind of tweaking that perspective and adding something different has been, huge, going back to something different.
yeah, it's very cool that you, like from listening to the podcast you did with Henry Akins recently, it sounds like all your students have been working on the same kind of thing. It's very cool. You get to bounce ideas off and see what works, what doesn't. Yeah, very cool environment you've created there.
And I think that's really like that has been I didn't do it on purpose. It wasn't like I had this really great thought of like, oh yeah, we're gonna create this place and it's gonna make enough good jujitsu minds that we can. It's not one person thinking of an idea; it's 100, right? And then we're all. Then when there's something good, we all know that, and then we can all build off that, right? And that's what it is now. But really, what so much of it was then was trying to avoid just teaching so many just like random techniques and starting to go like, hey, this is why this works, this is why this works. And then when I switched to like, hey, this is why this works, and here's a different move that this other one of the guys from the gym will show, when I started doing stuff like that, it was like as if we all started contributing to the same goal of all of us getting better at the same time. And then that goal seems to build off of itself and let you like just keep rolling on it. And so that has been, it really was just like me trying to get out of teaching, you know. It really is just that's the basis of all it was is like, yeah, this guy that's wrestled his whole life, he has a great perspective on this too. Show that. And I'm going to sit here and learn, you know? And so, yeah, that was
3D chess.
that really is where that came from. Um, what is your just kind of like, I don't really have much left, but I did really, as you bring that up, I really was curious too. What is your training environment looking like now? The last we talked, you were just starting to get some people together and doing jujitsu. And so what is it now?
Kind of the same. Um, yeah, there's one guy who's the like my business partner and the primary developer of the Outlier database. Me and him are like the only two like super consistent practitioners. And then there's maybe like three other people that come every now and then. So like right now, our current schedule is maybe we'll train Saturday, Sunday, maybe just Saturday. Maybe we'll do Saturday, Sunday, and then me and the developer guy will train on like a Tuesday or something, just to like, I saw something cool, like, hey, dude, you want to train this morning so we can like kind of go over some ideas and mess around with something. But yeah, like right now it's like 1, 2 times a week with like relatively new people. The developer guy that's the consistent training partner is a blue belt. So he's the like consistent good training partner that I like try things on. And if I can get it to work on him, it's like, all right, there's some potential here. But everyone else is like pretty new. And then we get the occasional like visitor, maybe like once a month or every other month that comes through on vacation and wants a place to train. So then we just try and tear him apart when he comes. But
Hey,
yeah.
that's one thing that's true for all jiu-jitsu schools. That's the rule, you know?
I don't make the rules.
Yeah. And you think I think you should expect it, you know? I think that you should I think it would be
Sign the
weird.
waiver.
Yeah, I think it'd be weird not to expect. You know, like if I went in like that's what we're doing here. You guys, I'm it's nice to meet all of you, but you guys don't know if I'm any good. You want to know. I want to know if you're any good. Let's see, you know? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, and then if you come in on our home turf, we'll stack the deck against you. You know, you come into head nod, you're going to fight some of the toughest 40-year-old plus dudes that you have ever rolled with in your life. You're going to be like, what do these guys do? And like, dude, they lift weights, they eat protein, and they just train a ton of jujitsu. They're all crazy. But then at the end of all of that, you're like, man, I went through the ringer, then I'll call the adult class out. And so like we'll have all of our, and then you get me at the very end. Like, man, I've done 47 rounds. Josh isn't even rolling. Wait, why is he warming up now? What's going on? So yeah,
doing breathing exercises in the corner.
Why is he Wim Hof breathing over there? He's got headphones
The house
on.
always wins.
He's got a warm-up jacket. Did he just drink a liquid IV? Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's how it be, man. Like you said, I don't make the rules.
Yeah, the house always wins.
The house always wins. That is the truth. Jake, is there anything that you want to say to finish? Any closing thoughts, arguments, anything you have?
No, I really enjoy talking with you, and yeah, maybe we can do it again when we have some more concrete stuff built out with the database and kind of bounce some more ideas off of you as we kind of build out the path we're going. But yeah, no, I appreciate you taking the time and having me on.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you being on. I still enjoy your content. I still enjoy watching what you put out, and I still hold to there are a lot of great coaches, and we agree with that. There are a lot of great competitors. There aren't a lot of great jiu-jitsu YouTubers, man. Like I enjoy what they provide. And so even if it's entertainment value, there's not a lot that I enjoy what they provide. And so I appreciate all the the great free content that you provide.